regarding attempted rape allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, and of course the accuser is Christine Blasey Ford, the smear tactics from the right have begun, and they have begun aggressively. They are relentless, and it also includes quite a bit of funding, and I'll give you some examples of how it's all going down. So first, there is the Judicial Crisis Network. This is a group of conservatives who aggressively fight to have pro-corporate conservative Supreme Court judges nominated. And so they have decided to put $1.5 million behind a television ad blitz that features a person who has been friends with Kavanaugh for 35 years. Okay, so that's the beginning of it. Also, the Judicial Crisis Network has already pledged to spend $5 million backing Kavanaugh. So their first ad was released immediately. They released it last night, Monday night, and we have it for you just so you get a sense of the tactics they're planning on using. Take a look.
Friends with Brett Kavanaugh for 35 years. Never thought about doing a TV commercial. I'm not involved in politics. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I believe that we need to have bright, curious, open-minded, thoughtful, empathetic people who are judges. And I trust that Brett is that person. He's dedicated to his work. He's dedicated to his family. He's of the highest integrity as a person. And I believe that he would be a great Supreme Court justice.
So that ad features a teacher who claims to have known him for 35 years. The tactic is, hey, look at all these people who can vouch for him, vouch for his character. Because, people who have been accused of rape, everyone has to dislike them throughout their entire lives. It's impossible for that person to have a group of people in their personal lives that like them and respect them, while they could also in their, in private do things like attempted rape.
So, I think the substance of that is pretty weak. A lot of people liked OJ too. That didn't mean he didn't do it. He was a very likable guy outside of murdering two people. But I think the more important part of this is, that's fascinating. So $5 million they've announced that they're gonna spend, and 1.5 they've already put into TV ads. Where's the money coming from? Is it concerned citizens who are genuinely pro-life and they care about that and they think Kavanaugh is pro-life? Is it genuine citizens who think, no, I don't know anything about Kavanaugh being against Roe versus Wade, because that's the official Republican stance, right? I just think he's such a wonderful principled jurist that I'm looking forward to having him confirmed on the Supreme Court. So I'm gonna give $5, $10, $27 to make sure I run these ads. No. The funny thing is, it has nothing to do with the hot button topics that you're seeing. No, the ad is funded by very wealthy people and corporations, because Kavanaugh is massively pro big business. So they need his vote in there, not for Roe versus Wade, not for anything else. They need it to make sure that he advances a pro corporate agenda. So those donors are like, oh, he is accused of attempted rape. Whatever, roll in the $5 million. Let's get this guy in the court so he can rule against our employees all day long. That's what's being played here. You think $5 million materializes out of nowhere for this? No, there's people who think, I'm gonna make a buck off of Kavanaugh being on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely, and he is a pro-corporate judge. His past rulings and decisions prove that, and the fact that they were able, this organization, the Judicial Crisis Network, was able to get this funding secured so quickly tells you something. There are people who are worried about their bottom line. At the end of the day, rape doesn't matter, attempted rape doesn't matter, his character doesn't matter. The rulings that he might have in regard to social issues or women's health doesn't matter, And by the way, the Judicial Crisis Network is just one organization that includes people that are now attacking Ford and her allegations. There's also Dennis Prager, and he wrote an op-ed for the National Review that was disgusting. And so I'm gonna give you a few of the excerpts. Prager, who once called the idea of college rape culture a gargantuan lie, argues in his piece for National Review that the allegations against Kavanaugh should be ignored because they tell us nothing about Brett Kavanaugh since the age of 17.
So there's two different parts to that. One is the general, the rape culture being a gargantuan lie. I don't know what he means by that, but I know what he encourages by that. He encourages people to go, it's not a big deal. Just don't worry, don't spend too much time on it. So when victims ask for more protections from universities, don't sweat it. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. So that's a terrible thing to spread. The second part of it is him saying, look, this happened when he was 17. It doesn't tell us anything about him being 53. That actually I find to be the least offensive of all the defenses of Kavanaugh. But hold, he's gonna get to really, really offensive in a second.
I disagree with you. I think attempted rape at any age says something about a person, right?
No, I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying of all their defenses of Kavanaugh, that's the least offensive. Do you see what I'm saying?
Because it's a low bar.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a low bar, but look, and we've had this discussion before. So if he was accused of this a year ago when he was 52, well, it's a no-brainer, right? Everybody knows that he's responsible for it. If he was accused when he was, as we talked about on Friday's show, I believe, 12, well, that's a different situation when he was 12. So I think that their best defense is, well, 17 is closer to 12 than it is to 52. It doesn't mean that I believe in that defense, but the other defenses are way, way worse because they're saying like, what happened to her is not that big a deal. And now Prager's about to make those arguments. The Judicial Crisis Network spokesperson's about to make those arguments on CNN. I think those are horrific arguments. They should go nowhere near them, which only leaves them this, or she's just made it up entirely. I think that's otherwise they got nothing.
So in this National Review piece, he also writes, this is another example, keep in mind, like this is what he's focusing on here. This is another example of the moral chaos sown by secularism and the left. Okay, let's stop for a second. By the way, Dave Rubin, you should feel really proud of yourself for working for this guy. That's the problem? Secularism is the problem?
Yeah.
The chaos sown by secularism is the problem? You don't think that it's problematic that someone who might be a new Supreme Court justice in the highest court in the country might have carried out attempted rape? You don't think that that's the problem? You think that secularism is the problem?
I mean, but get a load of that inverted logic where they live in the upside down. So he's like, if people were more religious, they would realize that charges of attempted rape are no big deal. He's arguing that, Prager's arguing that that is the moral position. The immoral secular left position is attempted rape is a big deal. Okay, look, you make your own decision on which one you think is moral and which one is not moral. But the way that they turn things on their head is amazing. Somehow he's made it so that the moral position is supporting attempted rape. Okay, but look, keep going. I'm telling you, it gets really, really, really bad.
In any society rooted in Judeo-Christian values, it is understood that people should be morally assessed based on how they behave over the course of their lifetime. Early behavior being the least important period in making such an assessment. Okay, so I have a billion things to say about this. First of all, I gotta go back to the whole secularism. So you don't believe in secularism? Do you believe in the Constitution? So do you think that we should be forced to believe a religion? Like, what does that even mean?
Prager's like, what drives me crazy about the right wing is that they respect guys like Prager because it's such a low bar. Most of the people in the party are total morons like Donald Trump and George W. Bush. So when somebody with a pulse shows up, they're like, Dennis Prager. Oh my God, he's got a university where he teaches how bad the secular left is. But think about how irrational he is on every front. To Anna's point there, you don't believe in secularism. So you think what? Church and state should be combined, that religion should rule us? But Prager, you're Jewish. I got news for you. Your religion isn't going to win. And I've got further news for you because apparently, even though you've got a whole university you've named after yourself, let's just note how obnoxious that is. And the other guy who did that was Donald Trump. Anyway, historically, which you've apparently never studied, when Christians or any religion rule over Jews and other minorities, it doesn't end well. When they say, hey, I'm gonna use my religion to rule, and by the way, you're in a minority religion. Have you studied any history? Do you know how that ends? Oh yeah, I got a great idea. Let's make sure that we don't do secularism. We combine church and state. Oops, I'm in the minority religion. I didn't think that through because I'm one of the dumbest guys alive.
Okay, so let's get to the second part of that excerpt that is insane. So look, I don't care if he did this at 17. For me, it doesn't matter because guess what normal people don't do at the age of 17? Attempted rape, right? So it's one thing if, hey, when I was 17, I decided to drink and get behind the wheel and I got caught in a DUI. Like if that was an allegation against Brett Kavanaugh, I'd be like, okay, come on, like we've all made mistakes, let's move on. This is attempted rape, okay?
Yeah,
this is different from any other youthful indiscretion that people could be accused of.
So look, and DUI obviously is very serious, and that's why it's an important and interesting conversation, et cetera. And that's why we said in the beginning, if you're gonna go back to high school, it's gotta be a high bar. It doesn't get much higher than attempted rape. And in terms of some of the attacks against Kavanaugh, they're all pointing to how he used to admit to drinking a lot in high school. Look, for people who are looking to corroborate Professor Ford's story that he was stumbling drunk, that is relevant. For people looking to say he was a bad guy in high school for over drinking, that is not relevant. I want to be clear because they're going to set up straw man arguments. We don't care that he drank too much. We care about what he did on that day when he drank too much and allegedly did the attempted rape. That's what we care about, not about the drinking. So, but for God's sake, let's get to his mom and his wife and what he thinks.
So he tries to make it seem like, getting groped is not that big of a deal, that people in his personal life had to deal with it and they handled it just fine. My mother was groped by a physician. She told my father about it. My father told the physician that if he were to do that again, he would break his hands. And then he talks about his wife. Let me get to this because this gives you even more detail into his way of thinking. He says, when my wife was a waitress in her mid-teens, the manager of her restaurant grabbed her breasts and squeezed them on numerous occasions. She told him to buzz off, figured out how to avoid being in places where they were alone, and continued going about her job. That's empowerment.
No, it's not. No, it's not. So you think the right approach for, my God, your mom and your wife is when men grab their breasts, there should be no consequences. There should be no legal consequences. That's not sexual assault. That most of the consequences should be, hey, I told them to buzz off.
No, that the onus is on the woman, right? Because if your manager or a higher up in the company that you're working for gropes you and makes you uncomfortable, tell him to buzz off, and then the onus is on you to avoid contact with him. The onus is on you to make sure you're not in a room alone with him.
That's not, what part of that is empowerment?
He's a clown, I mean, come on.
And he said his wife was in her mid-teens, so she was what, 14, 15, 16 years old, and this guy's constantly sexually assaulting her at work. He puts that as a positive example of, come on, what's the big deal? Everybody played with my wife's breasts when she was a teenager. Everybody played with my mom's breasts. What's the big deal, man? They just brushed it off. But even if you don't think that's a big deal, and there's something really weird and off about you if you don't think that's a big deal, but remember that those things often lead to the guy not buzzing off, but being encouraged that no cops were called and that there were no real consequences, and leading to much more serious things. It reminds me of the Roy Moore story, where he kept hitting on a teenager who was a waitress at a restaurant he used to frequent, and then one day he tricked her into getting in the car, according to the allegations, and then started ripping her clothes off and forcing her head down onto his lap. Oh, well, there goes your buzz off strategy, Dennis Prager. What a brilliant thing that was. Hey, Dennis Prager, if somebody comes and punches you in the face, why don't you just tell them to buzz off? What's the big deal? Man up, Dennis, man up. Oh God, these days when everybody wants to go to the police and actually press charges on assault or attempted rape. Oh, in the good old days, we just spit on it, right? I remember those days. Our coach was telling us you get hurt, you get spit on it, right? Now, I don't want anybody punching Dennis Prager. I don't want anybody doing anything physical. But these guys, they're abhorrent. I knew that they would go to the bottom of the barrel, and immediately they're like, he's basically saying, so he pinned her down, tried to rip off her bathing suit, held her mouth closed down while his friend turned up the volume so they couldn't hear her screams. What's the big deal? Why didn't you just tell him to buzz off? Yeah. That's who Dennis Prager is. Yeah. Any right winger who looks up to Dennis Prager, I feel sick to my stomach for you because that's so embarrassing. That's the intellectual of the right wing. It's pathetic.
So finally, another part of his op-ed, I guess, touches on what he thinks if these allegations are true. Even if true, what happened to her was clearly wrong, but it tells us nothing about Brett Kavanaugh since the age of 17. But for the record, I don't believe her story.
The whole setup is, who cares if it's true? At the very end, he says, by the way, of course I don't believe her story. Why, on what basis do you not believe her story? So for example, we explained in the beginning, we don't know. More evidence came out, then we explained, hey, listen, she talked to her therapist. The therapist wrote down the notes in 2012, 2013. That's a good reason to believe her. There's at least some evidence. It's hard to know what happened on that day. We're trying to have a reasonable assessment of the fact scenario. His reasonable assessment was, of course I don't believe her. I don't believe her. But so what if it happened? So what if he tried to rape a 15-year-old? What's the big deal? Wow, that is quite intellectual of you.
So there's one final component to this story, and I'm sure that there are more smears happening as we speak, as we do this video. But there was an individual who appeared on CNN. Her name is Carrie Severino, and she's with the Judicial Crisis Network, the same group that we talked about earlier. And she had an interesting way of describing the allegations. Take a look.
Her allegations cover a whole range of conduct from boorishness and to rough horseplay to actual attempted rape. And so obviously if you go to rape, yes, that is a really serious allegation.
But Carrie, I don't think anywhere in there she's saying this is boorish horseplay at all in her letter. I don't think that's at all what she's suggesting.
She's certainly implying that it's attempted rape, but I think you have to look at there's a 35 years of memory that we're trying to play with here, and I'm saying that the behavior she described could describe a whole range of things. I know her perception of it was one way. I'm just saying I think we have to get all of the facts. That said, Judge Kavanaugh says this didn't happen at all. So under any interpretation, he says no, that I was not at a party like that. This didn't happen.
Wow, Carrie, you really need to work on your spin, skills, because you were really struggling there, weren't you?
Yeah, well, because they have to have a woman go out and say it. So they're like, hey, Carrie, you drew the short straw. Go out and defend attempted rape. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, look, you're going to have it in the range of options so that you don't seem like the worst person on earth. You don't seem like you're Dennis Prager. But in there, you're going to inject talking points, and we're going to test them out. Remember, Judicial Crisis Network, as we explained earlier, funded by these huge, and it's all secret, corporate and really rich donors who want Kavanaugh on the court for their own financial purposes. And so they're like, hey, listen, you're paid to do this for us. So describe the attempted rape as, quote, rough horseplay. And what they do is they send out somebody to do that first. And then if it works and people like it, then they repeat it. And then it becomes a talking point. Oh, it was just rough horseplay. It was just rough horseplay. And you'll see it over and over and over again. That was them testing it out. I got news for you. That test didn't work. So as you could tell from the reaction of the anchor at the time, who was kind of taken aback by it, the reaction online, our reaction, any decent person's reaction, you could have left it at, hey, it's so hard to know what happened on that day 35 years ago. No, you had to inject that talking point. And when you characterize attempted rape and covering a woman's mouth while trying to rip her clothes off as rough horseplay, well, it harkens back to, well, that's not torture, that's just enhanced interrogation. And those aren't detention centers, what were they calling them? Family residences or something along those lines. So no, it's not rough horseplay. And it's sick that you're being paid to say that, to see if you guys can get people to believe that it wasn't what it actually was. Well, apparently, according to the allegations.
In America, you can pay anyone to say anything, doesn't matter.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.